I was born in Brooklyn, New York. My parents, Ralph and Ethel, are physical education teachers. Was the second of 4 kids. We moved out to the suburbs and grew up on Long Island in Centerport, New York. I'm really blessed with the family that I was brought into and I was able to grow up with. My older brother Jim, who was in 8th grade, decided to try out for wrestling, and I tagged along and wrestled that first year on the B team in junior high, and by then I was pretty much hooked on wrestling. And in high school I was really blessed with great coaches. Long Island has great wrestling and I was able to improve every year, and it was something that I felt like I really wanted to do in college. Even though I never made the state tournament, I did make our junior national team and got to compete in the 1978 Junior Nationals in Iowa City. I went and visited Boston University. I liked it. I was a walk-on at the team. I had 2 coaches in college. When I was first in college, Fred Lett, who coached our team for my first 3 years. He's somebody that made a difference in my life. And then my senior year, Boston University decided to hire Carl Adams. You know, Carl was one of the great wrestlers to come out of Iowa State. Again, wrestling was a lot of fun for me. I was a starter for all 4 years and I had a winning record. It was an important part of my college. I really got involved in journalism in high school. When I was a kid, I watched the Watergate hearings and I really enjoyed that and thought maybe I'd like to be an investigative journalist. And in high school, I wrote for 2 local newspapers, writing about sports at my high school. So I thought I was going to end up being a newspaper reporter. And what happened, we graduated in 1982 and there was a recession and not a lot of jobs out there. And I wasn't able to get a newspaper job right away. So at that point, Carl Adams, who was a very innovative, creative inventor in wrestling, wanted to start a wrestling magazine, and he asked me to come back to Boston and be the editor of the wrestling magazine. And we started a business together, and he played a huge factor in my life and in my career.
I knew that Gary was familiar with all the steps that it would take to get this magazine on the market. But one of the biggest things that attracted me to Gary was that he was a hard worker and that Gary would finish whatever he started.
It was a unique magazine. We put a lot of technique in it, and that was before they had videotapes and before they had the internet, and obviously we covered wrestling at the national level. Through the course of Wrestling Masters, I got to pretty much know everyone in wrestling. Carl introduced me to everybody, and it was really helpful to me to become somebody who was very comfortable in the wrestling community. So after our business was no longer able to continue, there was an opportunity, an opening at USA Wrestling, and I applied for it. Even though I struggled with leaving the East Coast, I decided to take a chance and take the job at USA Wrestling in 1988, and I'm still there.
Never has there been a task too little for Gary to work on or accomplish. Never in my life have been around someone that cared more about wrestling or the organization for that matter. And Gary has long been an MVP for USA Wrestling in the sport of wrestling.
There were some really high moments, that occurred during my wrestling career. Coming to mind first was on my 40th birthday when Rulon Gardner defeated Alexander Karelin, the unbeatable wrestler. When Helen Maroulis was able to become our first Olympic champion in women's wrestling, beating a three-time Olympic champion, and that was a big deal for me because women's wrestling is very close to my heart. I also will always remember when Kyle Snyder ended up beating Sadulayev in the last match and giving the U.S. the world team title in 2017. That one had about as much drama as you could imagine. I've been able to attend 8 Olympic Games, and Tokyo will be my 9th.
Everywhere that Gary goes, wrestling is in his heart. He was always the first one at the venue, the last one to leave, and he was absolutely dedicated to the athlete and to the sport.
There are 2 incidents that really affected my career. In 1996, when Dave Schultz got murdered, clearly that situation changed my life. It affected the way that I approached my job. It was very challenging, and when the International Olympic Committee decided to recommend that wrestling be removed from the Olympic Games.
Gary shifted into action, told USA Wrestling leadership that there's one way we're going to get back in these Olympics, and it's through the media. And for 8 months, Gary lived and breathed wrestling promotion, telling the world how valuable it was as a sport, how important it was to the Olympic program, and I believe he is one of the key people that brought the sport back into the Olympic Games.
Pretty much my entire career at USA Wrestling, women's wrestling has been part of what we did, but even early on I realized that wrestling's a great sport and that everyone should have an opportunity to wrestle regardless of whether you're a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. And I really enjoyed getting to know our early wrestling pioneers for women's wrestling. People like Trish Saunders, Afsoon Roshan Zamir, people like Shannon Williams. The real pioneers in wrestling were great people, and it was very important to me as part of my career, and I was given an opportunity to take leadership in that. It's one of the highlights of my career has been the development of women's wrestling.
One of the first that jumped all over women's wrestling. He was for it, he pushed it, he let the world know about it, and I get some accolades about women's wrestling, but it doesn't matter if I sit out there and talk about it if there is not a Gary Abbott that's out there pushing it, as you well know.
The lessons I learned in wrestling have helped me in my career, it's helped me in my family, it's helped me in my faith. It's made a difference in all aspects of everything that I do. I'm blessed to have a great family. My wife, Patricia, who's a wrestling person, I actually met her through the sport of wrestling. Our kids, Eva, Justin, Bruce, Tim, and Kevin, they're all part of my success and what makes my life really valuable. And I'm blessed to have grandchildren and spend as much time with them as I can. I understand the value and importance of the Hall of Fame for the history of wrestling and what it means for our sport. And to be included with so many great wrestling people, many of them who are great friends of mine, is an honor and a privilege, and I just feel blessed to have the opportunity to join this fraternity and sorority of great people.